certainly this was a football team that, in addition to being 6-0, was not only 6-0, was a couple score lead on Clemson and maybe a questionable call or two away from the way I saw it from being 7-0. And now Garrett Schrader's hurt. They've lost 3 consecutive games. So the team's in a much different spot right now than they were just a few weeks ago.
Yeah, you mentioned Schrader being out, and that's a key loss for Syracuse this year. He's just had evolved into a threat passing the ball as well as running. And, in that Clemson game, the first half, Clemson keyed in on Sean Tucker, and Syracuse ran a lot of read option, and it opened up early in the game Schrader to get outside and use his legs and his mobility to make some plays. Clemson kind of adjusted in the second half and seemed to, instead of committing 2 players to Tucker, kind of bracketed him with a safety and linebacker, and their defensive line sort of took over. But without Schrader, being on the field, he was limited, played the first half against Notre Dame, wasn't running the ball, so took away his effectiveness. And then last week, Carlos Del Rio Wilson had his first collegiate start on the road against Pitt and just struggled all day with accuracy, a lot of high throws and overthrows.
What are you hearing, Kevin? And nice to meet you. I'm Logan here. What are you hearing on Garrett Schrader? Because I think that's what all Florida State fans are keeping an eye on this week. Coaches, it's what Florida State deals with, along with Mike Norvell. He does the same thing too. All coaches do, where they're not going to give the full answer, and we're not going to find out until Saturday around 8:00 or during warmups. What are you hearing? Is there some optimism that Schrader will be available, or will this be a kind of thing where Florida State had to go through with Tyler Van Dyke last weekend, where there was some talk about him playing? He played a little bit, but just wasn't fully healthy, and they ended up trying out a backup quarterback.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a similar situation. We don't get anything from Dino Babers unless it's a season-ending injury. Schrader has not been available for player media the last 3 to 4 weeks. So that's led to some speculation that he's, nursing something. Babers mentioned lower body, seemed a little concerned in his weekly press conference. So I'd speculate Schrader will come out and warm up like he did last week at Pitt, but then he came back out and wasn't dressed for the game. I think he could be dressed this time, but I think Syracuse, with 6 wins and having secured the bowl game, would probably err on the side of caution rather than throw him out there again when he's limited.
Hey, Kevin, I saw the scene after, I think it was the NC State game. Fans rushed the field at the Dome. Yeah. At that point, I think the team that may have been the 6-0 point to get to the Clemson game. And Dino Babers made a comment, which, he was excited, loved the scene and so forth. But he made a comment about getting to bowl eligibility that I thought it was a bit amusing. Now, I didn't want to take it out of context or take it wrong or read too much into it, but just where is this program in regards to expectations? What is a good season? This would be, in my thought process, Dino Babers' second good season. Of course, 2018 was a really good season, a top 15 finish. Other than that, a lot of 4-8, 5-7 finishes that in some people's eyes placed him on a hot seat. I don't know if he truly was entering this season, but what should this program be accomplishing?
I think, baseline expectations for this year was bowl eligibility. And I think what happens is when you start off 6-0 and then you're ranked and then you go to Clemson and you've got a lead, 2-score lead at halftime, expectations shift. And so the sense around here is that this is another one of those late season swoons. We had people looking at, 6-0, and after they even lost to the Clemson, they looked at Notre Dame, and people weren't looking at what Notre Dame was. They were looking at, there's a team that couldn't beat Stanford, lost at home to Marshall. Syracuse should win that game at home. They looked at Pitt struggling. And then when Syracuse, lost those games, which, some of it had to do with Schrader, some of it had to do with bad matchups with physical offensive lines, pushing an inexperienced and young defensive line around. I think people are a little disappointed now. You got Florida State coming in, playing a lot better than they have in the past. And if they lose another game, I think people kind of feel like, oh, now we're back to the same old Syracuse. But realistically, a 7-win season and then hopefully, winning a bowl game would be a successful year for this team. it's a program that needs to string together a few of these bowl eligibility, bowl eligible seasons to help with recruiting, to help with depth, to help recruit and get some of the talent back that, a lot of people around Syracuse think of the late 90s and Donovan McNabb and Marvin Harrison, and they don't look at the 20-year history where Syracuse, if you look on Sundays and there's very few Syracuse players that are, playing in the NFL and really limited on the offensive side of the football. And you guys know, you follow college football, and if you're going to have a successful program these days in a Power 5 conference, you've got to have some pro talent on both sides of the ball. And Syracuse is just kind of slowly getting to that point. And I think when we look back at the end of the year, people will have a different perspective. But in the midst of the season, that 6-0 start, as much as it got people excited, it also set them up for disappointment.
I think the biggest growth you've seen from Syracuse, though, this season, this game last year, 33-30, it was a close game. And Syracuse, like you said, starting off hot now. And somewhat of a decline, Garrett Schrader injured. But what have you seen specifically out of Syracuse that you've seen the most growth where Florida State's going to have to prepare for going into this game, you think?
For the first few weeks, it looked like the offense. But overall, it's been Tony White's defense. And they're beat up on the defensive line. But the duo at linebacker of Michael Jones and Marlo Wax, each week, they might be starting slow and they're giving up yards on the ground, but these guys are making plays in the second half to keep Syracuse in the game. People talk about the Clemson game, and that defense created 4 turnovers. One was a return for a touchdown that was a 14-point swing. Jahard Carter, the safety, he had the fumble recovery and an interception in that game. He's got 3 games in a row with an interception, and even down Garrett Williams at corner, Syracuse has been able to rely on some talent in the secondary and depth. And that second level of the defense is still making plays, even in this losing streak.
So, Kevin, I don't know how much of a chance you've had to look at Florida State, but like you mentioned, having its best season and got to go back to at least 2017. So what do you see out of Florida State? What do you think in terms of matchups are key in this one and pulling off what's going to be about a touchdown upset?
Yeah, it's funny because we actually saw Jared Verse last year with Albany. He came into the Dome and made a strong impression. I think he probably left Syracuse that day with an offer from the team, even unofficially before he went in the portal. But we didn't expect a player on Albany to come in and kind of dominate the Syracuse offensive line. And so he's a guy, the Syracuse offensive line has struggled in recent weeks. If you have Del Rio Wilson back there, inexperienced at quarterback, that sort of pressure. And then on the other side of the ball, obviously, it's Jordan Travis. Syracuse did well against Malik Cunningham early in the season. But containing a quarterback last year, Travis really came on at the end of the game and made a couple plays that got Florida State into position to kick that winning field goal. And so Florida State looks like they're running the ball well. And that just sets up, if you're going to commit 7 or 8 guys to trying to stop the run, that's going to leave you susceptible to some of those deep passes and those deep plays. So I think those 2 guys are key. Syracuse has to find a way to kind of neutralize Verse when they have the ball, control the ball, be able to move it. And then on defense, they've got to try and contain, Travis and keep him from really making those kind of plays that really deflate a crowd. That should be a good crowd. It's a night game, the last home game of the year. People be excited, but Notre Dame came right out and shut up the sellout crowd by getting an interception, return for a touchdown on the first play, and the crowd never really got back into it fully. So,
is this team outside of Schrader pretty healthy going into this game? It's late. Now we're in November. So at this point, guys are dinged up everywhere. But how healthy is this team that Florida State is going in to face?
Not very healthy at all. Syracuse lost 2 starters in the opening week, and it seems like every week someone else goes down, especially on defense. There's questions about Sean Tucker. He obviously hasn't had the impact that he had last year, whether he's injured or if it's just kind of a factor of the new offensive scheme. One of the players that went out in the first week was Chris Elmore, who was kind of the utility guy for Syracuse, but played offensive lineman 2 years ago in the COVID year so that Syracuse could field the team. Last year, he was kind of an H-back. He played in the game at Florida State, creates a lot of holes for Tucker and Schrader with his ability to come out of backfield as an extra run blocker. Syracuse has missed him, I think, more than people want to give credit for, because they were able to win those first 6 games. But it's really shown now as defenses are a little bit stronger and tougher, as the schedule's gotten tougher. Tucker's just not getting, into that second level where he can excel. He's been bottled up, and so this Syracuse team's pretty beat up, and I think that's unfortunate. And then that's where the depth comes in. You've got a former walk-on starting at defensive tackle, nose tackle in the 3-3-5, Kevon Darton, who's played well, but he's 250, 260 pounds. I think the broadcast noted last week that Pitt's offensive line average, or smallest guy, was 305, and Syracuse's heaviest defensive lineman was listed at 250. And so teams are leaning on that line and kind of wearing them down. And I'd expect that's the game plan Florida State will implement from the beginning too, is, try and really go at them. And Syracuse has tried to, sub in those defensive lines and 3-man units, even during drives, to keep them fresh, but it's been a challenge.
This is great information, by the way. I appreciate you hopping on here. This is good, definitely, for Florida State fans to get to know Syracuse.
No problem. Happy to help. Wish it was better news for Syracuse, but I think, that's the reality. And I think that's, the challenge of rebuilding a program that had fallen off so far is when you have those second and third string players, that you're digging into deeper talent. And right now, Syracuse is, especially on the defensive line, throwing in some unproven players and some true freshmen that have to hold up in ACC play.
Well, I think he gained a lot of fans across the country, because people love a Cinderella story, and when somebody jumps out to that kind of start, they're hoping that with the monopoly that college football has become, that somebody can kind of break up the party. And so there was some hope that Syracuse, and especially, I got to say, Clemson was pretty fortunate to escape that game. I only have one other question, and concerns the quarterback position with Carlos Del Rio Wilson. I checked in a few times during the Pitt game. I saw probably half the game, and there was a definite drop off, and just in terms of poise and leadership and running the offense. And there was a lot of just kind of throwing the ball downfield and hoping somebody was going to catch it. Yeah. Is he the guy in line next season, or, where does he stand in regards to, is he a blue chip prospect, somebody that's supposed to be the next guy in line?
Yeah, I think he was, he's one of the guys. Syracuse has a backup who actually played with the ones in the spring game, Justin Lamson, a quarterback out of California, but he injured his knee in spring ball, and so he's out this year. They picked up Del Rio Wilson as a transfer from Florida. He was a 4-star recruit like Schrader, but he didn't play a lot last year at Florida. And I think, he came to Syracuse in the summer, so he doesn't look as comfortable in the system that Syracuse is trying to run. He can move around in the pocket, but he likes to throw. He likes to move to throw, whereas Schrader is more of a threat to tuck it and run. And he seems to have a stronger arm than Schrader, but he missed a lot of the intermediate throws. And those were the throws that Schrader was hitting Aranda Getz in the second early in the season, and that kind of created a lot of space for Syracuse. There were a lot of third downs where Schrader was throwing the ball to Gadsden, and they had a good connection over the middle that Del Rio Wilson had him open for a touchdown in the fourth quarter and just threw it high and behind him. And that's what you get with a young quarterback on the road. And I think he'll probably see him, if he doesn't start, I think you'll see him in this game. Just by the sounds of it, it seems like he's leaning towards, Schrader not being able to go this week. So we'll see if he's settled down, if the coaching staff has kind of given him a little bit more tailored playbook. I think they did try to throw a lot of those deep balls, because he does seem to have a better arm, and it does seem more comfortable for him to kind of air it out. But it's a tough offense to kind of run when you're just kind of taking deep shots and hoping that they pan out.
I have one last question for you, Kevin. And what do you think Syracuse is going to have to do if they want to come away with a win? What are they going to have to do? Is there anybody, if they're going to target anybody, who are they going to go after? What do you think Syracuse should do for their game plan if they're going to try to come away with a win? That's Florida State, a team that's hot right now. Syracuse not so well, but still are going to try to compete here. They don't want to, this is probably a not so happy team right now. And Dino Babers is going to try. Dino Babers has competed very well against Syracuse during his last couple of years against Florida State. What do you think Dino is going to come up with his game plan?
I think it's, it's like anything else with college football. When you see an upset that you hit, either something on special teams or you hit one of those gadget plays. Robert and I came from Virginia with this history of, running some trick plays. We haven't seen a lot of it from Syracuse. So if he's got something in the playbook, those are the things that, whether it's a wide receiver pass or, a reverse or something gimmicky that you can maybe catch a team that's over pursuing early. And if you can jump on them and make a special teams play, those are the things that you're going to need to get an upset. And they've got to find a way to get Sean Tucker going. And if they can't run the ball with him, then they've got to use him in the passing game, because he's the one guy, I think, on Syracuse's offense that's going to match up athletically with a team like Florida State.